the UN Security Council and saying is that that apparently is that this UN Security Council 242, 1967, has probably been the bulwark of legislation and peace agreements. So it is probably the most important. It's probably the most important document as you're reading to get into. It was a resolution, and it says, my government has indicated its acceptance of the Security Council resolution for promotion of agreement on the establishment of a just and lasting peace. I am authorized to reaffirm we are willing to seek such an agreement with each Arab state on all matters included in that resolution. So this was, and it was, it's been the basis of every peace agreement, and it's been one of the most contested. And I'm going to go to the Six-Day War, which is next, because the Six-Day War really changed a lot. And the interesting thing about the Six-Day War was that it was actually started by Israel because they suspected that Egypt was getting ready to invade them. They suspected, they weren't sure. And they actually, because of they struck the war, struck as they did, is that they actually defeated Egypt on the ground before it even started. It raged for 6 days, 20,000 soldiers on the Arab side, 766 for Israel. And at the end of it is the result of the war that Israel had gained the West Bank of Jordan, which included Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, and the Jews now had control of Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years. Israel tried to negotiate a peace treaty. The Inter-Arab Conference, consisting of 13 Arab nations, met in Khartoum, Sudan in 67. The response from the conference was no peace, no negotiation, no recognition.
So I'm going to go back. You said that Israel started. If you're in Israel, they tell you that they were attacked by all their neighbors. I don't know.
No.
That's the only war that Israel initiated.
That's the only war that was initiated. There was a.
Diane said if we don't attack them now, we're going to lose.
That's right. And now I was raised in Miami, for about 15 years, and we had, and as you know, that because of the number of comedians that we have who are Jewish, is that it didn't stop there. Is that when this was going on, as one of my Jewish friends said, Moshe would have won this in 3 days if he had the patch on the correct eye. So that's how they feel. But there was not a seminal event that Israel was responding to. There was a suspicion that something was going to happen. And as Ron has said in one of his lectures, is that it literally caught the Egyptians completely off guard, and they literally destroyed the Egyptian Air Force in 1 day.
They did it on the ground.
They didn't even get off the ground. So the Six-Day War is a seminal point in all of this. It should have been the end, but it was the beginning. Now, last week.
You can see why the Arab states now wouldn't trust them.
Right. And last week I told you I added some slides. These are slides for Renee, because Renee said, I don't understand. So I then put together a few slides called Geography and Peace. Okay. Now, you can see those pretty well, yes? Okay. Before the Six-Day War and after the Six-Day War. Okay, that's what happened. All the green stuff on this right side up here is what was captured during the Six-Day War. Everything before that was not. So the Six-Day War did a bunch, and it redrew the geography. And that's why I call the slide Geography and Peace.
Is that where
Because,
the lines exist now too?
pardon?
The right side is all the green is Israel now too?
No, this is just after 1967. This is Geography and Peace. So we're going to go forward with more geography, okay?
They're gonna give all that back.
And so that was the result. Now, think of all the people whose land went from beige to green. They not happy, okay? And you heard the result of the Six-Day War. No peace, no recognition. We're done, okay? That has been the prevailing sense since then. But we're going back to geography. So one of the things you said to me, the Golan Heights. What does that mean? Okay, well, let's go look at the Golan Heights. Are up in the top in the light. See the little bitty thing. The Golan Heights prior to '67 was not there, and then it got taken by Israel. The Golan Heights. Syria was not pleased. Okay, now let's just go back here and we say, okay, so let's talk about the Golan Heights. They were part of the Ottoman Empire. Everything was part of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, in 1920, the French-British mandate. The French took most of the Golan Heights.
Because they had Syria and all that stuff. That was
Pardon?
the area. They had the whole area.
They had the whole thing. In 1944, the French mandate ended, and New Syria was given the Golan Heights, but not all. In 1967, Israel voted to give all of the Golan Heights to Syria. In 1967, Israel voted to give all of the Golan Heights to Syria. Syria said no.
Sorry, that was Siri. She was listening to you.
Siri. She was listening with a southern accent, yeah. Okay, so in 1967 is that Israel said you can have it. Now, I've 36-page document. The Golan Heights is nothing. It is a high plateau. It is not arable. It's just a bad piece of property.
Well, the only reason Israel would want it is so that you couldn't get up there and file down
Right.
on it.
Now,
Straight down.
Israel had started doing stuff in the Golan Heights in the 1890s. They were bringing water to it, and could actually flourish. But Syria said, we don't want this dirt. We just don't want it. 1973, the Yom Kippur War. Almost all of the Golan Heights were governed by Israel. The Golan Heights Law in 1981, ratified by Israel's government. Israel took control of all of it. Between 1990 and 2000, the peace talks about the Golan Heights were initiated. From 1999 to 2000, it failed. Part of the reasons it failed because Syria started its civil war, and there was really no one to negotiate whether they wanted it or not. In 2000 to present, peace talks continue. That's the.
What's there to have peace talks about? If Syria doesn't want it, Israel has it, it's there. I mean, there's nothing to negotiate.
Well,
There's no one
fighting.
else.
Israel changed its mind in 1981 and made the Golan Heights a part of Israel. And that's that little 1981 thing.
Syria doesn't want it.
The UN Security Council has said that Israel can't have the Golan Heights.
Okay, so that's what the peace talks.
Yeah, so they're still trying to negotiate that. But Israel, now, you'll also hear that the buildings in Golan Heights and the building on here, that was Benjamin Netanyahu. We're going to get to Benjamin Netanyahu later. Okay, so the next place that we're going is the West Bank, which is the other place, the West Bank. Ta-da! It's called the West Bank because it's on the west bank of the Jordan River. Just file this away. All of this has been about water. All of this has been about water. If you're in a desert, what's the thing that you need the most? Water. Okay. And so this has all been about water, and one of the greatest lines about water that I've ever heard was from Mark Twain. He said, "Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over." And he was talking about the Midwest and the western states, California and so forth. So whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting over. So part of this is we're fighting over water. Okay. West Bank, part of the Ottoman Empire. In 1922, it was given to the Emirate of Transjordan. Okay. In 1948, the Israeli war emerged in the wake of the war. It didn't exist. Occupied and annexed by Jordan. Go ahead, you can have it. 1967, Six-Day War. Captured by Israel, but it has never been annexed by Israel. In 1988, Jordan gave it to the PLO. In 1993, the Oslo Accord divided into A, B, and C. A, the PLO governed, which is about 11%. B, joint Israel and Palestine, 28%. And C, 60% to Israel. In 2004, an advisory ruling by the International Court of Justice concluded that the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, remain Israel-occupied territory. And Israel is building, and people are taking umbrage. Ta-da. Gaza Strip. You can see the Gaza Strip. It's right there, and this is where, and right there, the line at the top of the page is where there has always been a kind of peaceful existence going back and forth through here. And then you hear about coming through the Rafah exit to bring in the thing. That's down on the Egypt side. Now, Egypt's in control of the Sinai Desert now, and I'll tell you why later. So the Gaza Strip, okay? In 1948, it was established and controlled by Egypt as a refuge for Palestinians who fled or were expelled during the 1948 War of Independence. Okay. In 1967, it was captured by Israel, along with the Sinai Desert. In 1993, the Oslo Accords established a Palestinian Authority as limited governing authority.
Let me interrupt 1 minute. The Oslo Accords, who was involved in the Oslo Accords? What countries were involved in that?
I think we're going to get to that if we haven't already gotten to it. In 2006, Hamas became the governing body.
Right, they had an election.
In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew its military, dismantled its settlements, and initiated a temporary blockade. Israel withdrew its military, it dismantled its settlements, and it initiated a temporary blockade. So 2005, I don't know why I don't have those out of order other than it fits. And then in 2006, Hamas became the governing authority. In 2007, the temporary blockade was made permanent. And the only thing the blockade was doing was trying to stop weaponry from coming into Gaza. In 2007 to 2013, rocket attacks from both sides, each saying was caused by the other. So since 2006, it's been, I'm gonna send a rocket at you. I'm gonna send you back a rocket. I'm gonna, ta-da. That's what's going on. And then in 2023, October 7th happened. And that's where we are on Gaza. And we were talking earlier, well, what's happening right now is there's possibility of a ceasefire or a stand down so that they can get more product, more medicines and food into Gaza to stop some of the suffering of the thing. But hadn't happened yet. Sinai Peninsula. Okay. It was part of the Arabia Petrae. It was called Arabia Petrae. I have no idea what it is. It was misnamed as Sinai because the mountain near St. Catherine's Monastery was thought to be the biblical Mount Sinai, which it's not. But that's what they thought. Part of Egypt from the first dynasty, from 3100 BC, Egypt ruled Sinai. It became part of the Ottoman Empire, who knew, 1517 to 1867, United Kingdom, 1882 to 1956. In 1956, we had the Suez Crisis, which then started the Six-Day War. Israel won and occupied in 1956. I have it twice. In 1973, Yom Kippur War, Egypt lost. 1982, Egypt and Israeli peace treaty. Israel withdrew from all except the Taba territory, which I could not find a map of. Sorry guys, don't know where it is. In 1989, Israel withdrew completely. So all of the green stuff became desert again. So Egypt has control of the West Bank. Therefore, they have control of the Red Sea, they have control of the Arabian Sea, and they have of the Sinai, and they have control of the Suez Canal. So that's all Egypt stuff. Okay. Now, now we're getting back. That's the geography part. You caused it because I couldn't answer the question. I couldn't figure out where to put this, so some of it's disjointed because I've already flashed forwarded to 2023. Now we're going to step back into 1969. There was the Rogers Plan, which is a 90-day ceasefire, a stand down for the Suez Canal in an effort to reach agreement in the framework of Unit 242. Israel rejected the plan, calling it an attempt to appease the Arabs at the expense of Israel, and the Soviets dismissed it as one-sided pro-Israeli. And Nasser rejected it because it was a separate deal with Israel, even if Egypt recovered even if they recovered all of Sinai. So it was rejected. Okay. The next thing was the 1972 Munich Olympic Games. It was a Black Septemberist group kidnapped 11 members, I think I misspelled kidnapped, 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team. They demanded 234 terrorists jailed in Israel and 2 held in Germany. The motive was nationalism. It was not religious. This is not a part of a religious war. All the hostages were killed, and the German police killed 5 of the 8 attackers. 3 survivors were released. The Israeli Mossad eventually hunted down all those involved in the attacks. And they killed them. And they killed them. On August 13, 2016, 2 days prior to the start of 2016, the IOC officially honored the 11 Israelis killed in Munich. Okay, next thing, the Yom Kippur War, 1973. We get the feeling this is something that we keep fighting over and over and over again. Okay. And the war was fought between Israel and a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria on October 6th and 26th through 26th. They launched a coordinated attack on Israel and Yom Kippur, the holy day on the Jewish calendar. By the way, I think that the October 7th was the last day of Yom Kippur. I think it was the last day of Yom Kippur, which is the end of the holiest days of the month. Israel was able to stop the Egyptian advance, recover the Golan Heights from Syria, took heavy casualties. A ceasefire went into effect in 1973. Next peace conference, Geneva Conference in 1973. Attempt to negotiate a solution with the Arab-Israeli conflict is in the United Nations 338, which is an adjunct to 242. And it was under the auspices of the United Nations Security General, with the United States and the USSR as co-chairman. Foreign ministers of Egypt, Jordan, and Israel were in attendance. Everybody at the table. The Syria's nameplate remained unoccupied, though Syria had indicated possible future participation. Each foreign minister spoke. Kissinger articulated a step-by-step strategy, and is central to the meeting, then adjourned. Nothing happened. Geneva Conference of 73. Although no agreement was reached at Geneva, the effort was not in vain. Following the Israeli election, a military disengagement between Israel and Egypt was signed, and the disengagement between Israel and Syria was signed on May 31. So everybody said, we're going to play nice in the sandbox. Okay. Attempted later years to revive the conference failed. The Sinai interim agreement between Israel and Egypt was signed in Geneva on 4 September of 75 as part of the Geneva Conference. The agreement stated that conflicts between Egypt and Israel shall not be resolved by military force, but by peaceful means. I think that still holds. I don't think there has been any war or attacks between Egypt and Israel. So that remains the same. Camp David Accord, 1978. In return for Egyptian recognition, Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula. Sadat and Begin were awarded a share of the 1978 Nobel Peace Prize. Sadat was assassinated by members of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad on October 6th for his attempt to make peace with Israel. Ta-da. And the more about this, 1979, 16 months after after his visit to there, it withdrew all its armed forces and civilians from the Sinai Peninsula, had captured during the Six-Day War, agreed to leave the Sinai Peninsula demilitarized. Now, it's through the Sinai Peninsula right now that all of the stuff that is supposed to be sneaking into Gaza is through that peninsula. Because it's demilitarized, then there's no one there really able to do anything with the desert. So the Sinai is just there.
Would it be too much to ask you to flash back to that picture of the Sinai so we can kind of see where they might be getting this stuff through there?
Oops, you want that?
Right.
Yep.
Right there. And you see that Egypt, and then all of this, all of that includes the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. All of that that's in the light beige, that is the Sinai Peninsula.
All of what? Okay.
All of that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
It would be hard to police because it's huge.
there we go. Pardon?
It would be hard to police because there's so much, even if you wanted to stop it.
It's like watching something on gun ownership and people in Montana who are making guns and selling them on the internet, and they're ghost guns and so forth. And one of the guys made a statement. He was the sheriff of a county in Montana. He said, I am the only police officer in this county. And the county is the size of Maryland. So, ta-da, it's how you're going to do that. So, yeah. So the Camp David Accords and the peace agreement. The agreement, I like the last line of this. The agreement in Noda made Egypt the first Arab state to officially recognize Israel, although it has been described as a cold peace. They aren't fighting each other, but I want to divorce them, but I just can't. All right. In 1982, Israel was being attacked by the PLO from Lebanon, and on June 6th, Operation Peace for Galilee, and you can see the map is that under Ariel Sharon pushed into Lebanon, eventually surrounding Beirut, the conflict ended when Lebanon agreed to expel the PLO, and during the fighting, Israel lost 386 men, and the PLO more than 3,000. The PLO has moved to Tunis, which is the capital of Tunisia, and led by Arafat. And the PLO continued terror attacks on Israel in the ensuing years. Now, part of what I had read about this was that the attacks that they were getting, were primarily rock throwers, and Israel responded almost disproportionately to what they were. But they got it, and the PLO was removed from there. And then, as the Stone Incident in 1987, it was triggered by Palestinian frustration over Israel's occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. It was marked by Palestinians throwing rocks at Israeli tanks. The Israeli army responded to stone throwing with tear gas, rubber bullets, and when the soldiers' life seemed threatened, live ammunition. The PLO in Tunis supported the acts financially. The uprising ended with the signing of the first Oslo Accords, which provided the framework for peace negotiation between Israel and Palestinians. Over the next 6 years, roughly 200 Israelis and 1,300 Palestinians were killed. Now, all of this stuff is in our immediate lifetime. And we read some of it. This one I didn't know of was a Madrid conference. Madrid was hosted by Spain, hosted by the United States and the Soviet Union, international community to revive the Israeli-Palestinian peace process through negotiation, involved Israel and the Palestinians, as well as the Arab countries, including Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. Conference bilateral negotiation, Israel and the respective Jordanian and Palestinian delegation, Lebanon and Syria, subsequent meetings on 28 January 92, multilateral about regional cooperation were started in Moscow, attended by Israel, the Jordan Palestinian delegation, and the international community, but without Lebanon and Syria. They don't show up to the peace conference. If you're trying to go to a marriage counselor and only one of you shows up, it may not be a lot of progress made. Okay.
Isn't that partially because their citizens are, they're not really all citizens, won't support them being there? So they'll be like Sadat, right?
Yeah.
So if you go and make a deal that your public doesn't like,
Right.
it's short-lived for you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything.
It's the Secretary Blinken said something interesting, and it's similar to this. It says is in the United States we have an open door policy, and in Russia they have an open window policy. If you go against what's going on, you might go. So the Oslo Accords of 1993. Okay, you had asked about the Oslo Accords in 1993. It was Israel and the PLO. They signed a declaration of principle on interim self-governing arrangements. The agreement in 94 was signed in Cairo, giving power to the PLO in certain areas of Palestine, and was set with a timetable for Israel withdrawal, and elections were established. The agreement did not stop attacks, included suicide bombings, which violated the accords. New negotiations were set. Oslo II. In November 4th, Yitzhak Rabin was shot by Yair Amir, a fellow Jew. Negotiation continued under Shimon Peres. I'm saying Shimon Peres. I did part of that as a Jew and part of that as a Mexican. Is Shimon Peres. Peres. Benjamin Netanyahu opposed giving too much to the PLO. So at this point, I said, okay, we got to figure out who all of these people are. And if you look, Netanyahu was a prime minister in 1996. He was prime minister in 2009, and he's a prime minister in 2022. Perez, who we talked about, Sharon, we've talked about, the others we haven't, but I wanted to give that list. So Netanyahu, in 96 to 2000, continued to pursue peace, but on a more limited basis. He accelerated the construction of settlements of the West Bank, thereby aggravating more. Ehud Barak replaced Netanyahu as prime minister. He took a weak approach. At the Camp David in 2000, he offered Arafat 90% of the West Bank. The offer was rejected, and a new intifada broke out. Sharon became minister in 2001. He refused to talk while the terror continued. Arafat died in 2004. His successors could not stop the terror. Sharon built a security wall, and incidents of terror declined. He pulled the troops from Gaza and turned the region over to the Palestinians, and they elected Hamas as the governor. And that's where that wall that separates Bethlehem and all of that, that's when the wall was built. And the only thing
Separates Bethlehem.
Pardon?
The wall separates Bethlehem.
Yeah, the wall, because Jerusalem, remember, Jerusalem's not,
Jerusalem's like
yeah.
Bethlehem.
But there's a wall built, and that wall, and it actually cuts Bethlehem in half. I think you probably saw it when you were there.
Our Jewish guy had to get off the bus.
Mhm.
Went to
Oh,
Bethlehem.
that's where that's.
Because they wouldn't let Jews into the Bethlehem area.
Yeah.
It's controlled by.
Yeah. All right, we're getting close. Camp David 2000. Bill Clinton, Ehud Barak, Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat. The summit took place in 2000. End the Israeli-Palestinian conflict ended without an agreement, largely due to irreconcilable differences between Israelis and Palestinians on the status of Jerusalem. Its failure was considered to be one of the main triggers of the second intifada.
I'm going to go back just 1 second to when they elected Hamas.
They elected Hamas.
Because, and one of the reasons they did that, Hamas was pretty darn smart, because it was the PLO, and then Hamas built schools and they built hospitals, and PLO did nothing for those people.
Well, part of that's correct, is that before Hamas, it was not the PLO, it was a Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, yes.
The Palestinian Authority was given the Gaza. And they were the ones who started building the hospitals and everything. So they were the good guys. But in 2004, Hamas was elected.
I thought, I had read, that was part of the reason they were elected, because they were doing those things for
Oh.
people, and the other ones, so yeah, I'll have to do more research on that, I guess.
I got 39 pages on Jerusalem alone. So Camp David, considered one of the main triggers. And then we got to, in the Al-Aqsa took place in September when Ariel Sharon made a visit to the Temple Mount, seen by Palestinians as highly provocative. It ended in 2005 when Abbas and Sharon agreed that the Palestinians would stop all acts of violence against Israel anywhere, and Israel would cease all military activity against Palestinians everywhere.
I wish I had started counting on how many times they had agreed to stop all the acts of violence. We've heard that before.
One of my friends who was an alcoholic, he stopped drinking every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And a friend of mine who was a smoker, and he every day he quit smoking. And yeah, he started. And if you'll just look at the last line, the terrorist attacks
Right.
continued. Do these prime ministers again, the new ones, Sharon, Ahmed, Netanyahu, Nefidi, Lepid, and not Netanyahu again. All right, getting near the end of this. Numerous issues need to be resolved. Now, this is somebody who is much smarter than I wrote this. I plagiarized it. I took 100%. I have the document from which this was done. Numerous issues need resolving before lasting peace can be reached. Borders and division of land, strong emotions relating to conflict on both sides, Palestinians' concerns over Israeli settlement in the West Bank, the status of Jerusalem, security concerns over terrorism, safe borders, incitements and violence, right of return to Palestinian refugees living in Palestinian diaspora. Now, that last line is easily a 1-hour lecture because when the Palestinians were displaced, they became refugees. And refugee status, according to the Palestinians, is ongoing. If you went to London and you created a multi-billion-dollar business, you are still considered a refugee and have a right to return. It is passed down through lineage. So if it happened to your mama, it happened to you. And there are people who have been living outside for now at least 2 generations who are still counted as refugees. And the numbers keep growing because of the refugees. Now, at this point, Larry Wallace would stop and talk a little bit about the the Syrian civil war. Because the civil war in Syria is that you have all of these refugee camps that are in Syria, and there's nobody negotiating on the part of them, and those refugees are still recognized as refugees, and we have to do something with them, but Syria's doing nothing to help them.
And these are some of the people that have been there for decades.
For decades. But they're doing nothing to help them except keep them in the refugee camps. Now, Larry?
Assad killed a bunch of them, didn't he?
Pardon?
That was a big thing. Assad killed a bunch of them.
Right.
Refugees, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to slaughter them.
And so the issue there, as we could talk on this for hours, is the right of return for the Palestinian refugee is, what does a refugee mean? I mean, I'm trying to think of, I can think of a couple of American things, and one of which would be the Native Americans, is that do the Cherokees actually own most of North Carolina and most of the state of Mississippi? And that's where I'm from, so I know more about the Cherokee than I do anything else. And then, do they own, they're refugees, right? And I'm not sure that we've taken care of them very well in the past. I don't know enough about that to talk about it, but that's the only thing I can think of, is that you've been gone for 100 years and now you want the land back. The other one that you have is, what right do some African Americans have to the West Congo and to, it's the same thing. They have been forced to go away from their home. Do they have a right to claim the homeland they were forced to go from?
Now, the many Cubans in South Florida, and I don't know if they consider themselves refugees, but they dream of someday being able to go back and
claim their family history and their family, yeah, right. So,
Yugoslavia is like that, Bosnia, Herzegovina, all that war was
right.
People that wanted to go back to before the Yugoslavian government, to where they used to live.
Right. And people will say, well, I have a deed to this property, and it's, and so forth. The two things on here that look like they're very difficult to resolve is, one, the strong emotions.
That's the one I thought of.
Because each day the emotion gets worse. What do you think the 10 and 12, 13 and 14-year-old young people in Gaza right now think of Israel?
Yeah, they hate it. And then everybody in Israel who just got bombed and lost people at the music
So-
festivals, you know, they hate, yeah.
So those are the strong emotions.
There was a project where they took some teenagers from Israel, teenagers
Yeah.
from Palestine, put them in a camp group for a few weeks. They became best friends. They went back and started over.
I think the name of this was it was either the Rock Creek, I'm trying to remember years and years ago. It was the Rock Creek experiment, and the basis of the experiment was done by the United States, Army. They took two groups of Boy Scouts who were friends, two groups of Boy Scouts, and they separated them half and half, put one on this side, one on that side, and they started talking about how bad each side was to the other side, so forth. And they did that for 7 days. And these kids were planning on doing all sorts of nefarious things to the others. They brought them back together after they had done that. And they never became friends again.
Only 7 days.
In 7 days. And so so we've proven, and what the military was trying to do was during World War II, how to make the United States soldiers hate Germany.
Hey, who?
Germany.
Because my dad was over there and they showed movies of the rape of Nanking.
Pardon?
They showed movies to the troops of the rape of Nanking.
Yeah.
They were banging babies and stuff like that. They
Yeah.
showed these films and they got worse and worse.
So-
Motivated to go take care of the Japanese.
So if we've proved psychologically that this can happen, what is happening to the next generation? And so therefore the strong emotions comes out. The slides right here now is October 7th. You all can read the paper. It's what's happening on that. Qatar's Initiative to Peace. Now there's a little bit of a bright spot in here, is that Qatar, who had been negotiating with Israel to have some sort of formal relationship of peace, and they stepped up, and they were the ones who started getting the first group of hostages done. They're still working in the background, and we go from there. And then I said, what about the rest? And the rest is Hezbollah. Is the Party of God, the Shia Islamic military group, political group based in Lebanon. It was found as a result of Israel's attacks on Lebanon in 1982.
There's always a result.
Okay, Hamas. It's an acronym of its official name. The Islamic Resistance Movement is the Palestinian Sunni Islamist political and military organization governing the Gaza Strip, which was occupied under international law, headquartered in Gaza City. It has a presence in the West Bank, the larger of the two Palestinian territories in which the secular Fatah exercises control. 1987, that's when they were established. The Houthi is a movement known as Ansar Allah. It's a Shia Islamist political organization. It's a 123, maybe that was 1923, I'm sorry. It emerged from the Saddam government in Yemen in the 1990s. The movement had its roots, it started in northern Yemen in the late 1980s to protect and revive Zayed religious and cultural traditions. That 4 is a footnote. Zaydism is a branch of Shia Islam different from the 12 schism of Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon.